Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time we're diving into continuous improvement and test automation.
Sounds exciting.
It is, and we've got a great guide for this one. The ISTQB Certified Tester Advanced Level Test Automation Engineering Syllabus.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one.
You shared it with us, actually, and it sounds like you're ready to move beyond just like the basics of keeping your test automation solution afloat.
Yeah, definitely.
And really start optimizing it for peak performance. So before we even jump into all the details,
Okay.
I'm curious, what's your biggest frustration with your current test automation setup? Like, where do you see the most potential for improvement?
Well, I think a lot of people struggle with just identifying those improvement opportunities.
Yeah.
You might have this feeling that things could be better, but where do you even begin?
For sure.
And the syllabus actually highlights the importance of data analysis. And one tool that I found really interesting is the what they call a test histogram.
Okay, a test histogram. So is that like some sort of fancy chart? I'm a visual person, so I'm kind of intrigued.
Yeah, it is a chart. It basically visually represents your test results.
Okay.
And it shows you these trends and patterns that you might not be able to see just by looking at raw data. So, for example, it can highlight tests that consistently fail.
Oh, that's helpful.
Or ones that take a really long time to run or generate a lot of false positives.
So it's like a heat map for my automation suite, showing me where the hot spots are?
Yeah, exactly. It makes it way easier to spot those problem areas.
Okay. I could see how that would be valuable.
Yeah, and then once you've identified those areas, you can start to dig deeper.
Yeah.
You can figure out why those problems are happening.
Okay.
And come up with more targeted solutions.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, the syllabus also mentions using AI and machine learning to, help with this whole process.
Yeah.
Even going as far as self-healing UI tests, which honestly sounds too good to be true. Is it really possible for AI to fix my tests for me?
It's becoming a reality.
Wow.
There are tools out there like Apple Tools and Mabel.
Okay.
And they use machine learning to analyze UI locators, so those bits of code that tell the test what to interact with.
Right.
And so if a locator changes, the AI can actually identify the new one and update the test automatically.
Oh, wow.
It's not perfect, of course.
Yeah.
These tools have limitations, and they can sometimes introduce some complexity.
Right.
But they can be really powerful for reducing that maintenance burden.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. I do wonder, though, does that create a reliance on the tool and potentially mask underlying issues in our code? Like if the AI is constantly fixing things for me, am I going to miss important clues about problems in my application?
That's a good point. It's important to strike a balance.
Yeah.
These tools are great for handling those predictable UI changes that always seem to break tests.
Okay.
But you still need to understand what the AI is doing. And you still need to pay attention to code quality.
Right. That makes sense. So we've talked about using data analysis and AI to uncover improvement opportunities.
Right.
What about actually making our tests themselves more efficient and robust?
Yeah, the syllabus talks about that too.
Okay.
Especially in the area of scripting techniques.
Okay.
So it encourages moving beyond simple linear scripts, those ones that execute steps in a fixed order,
Yeah.
toward more sophisticated approaches like data-driven testing and keyword-driven testing.
You know what? I've heard those terms thrown around, but I never really understand the difference. Like, what's wrong with simple linear scripts anyway?
Well, imagine you're testing a login form.
Okay.
With a linear script, you would have to write separate tests for each username and password combination.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's a lot of repetitive code.
Yeah, that would get out of hand quickly.
Exactly. Data-driven testing lets you run the same test logic with different sets of data.
Okay.
You can store your usernames and passwords in a spreadsheet or database, and the test just iterates through them. So it's way more efficient and allows you to cover more scenarios.
Right.
And then keyword-driven testing takes it a step further.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this keyword thing.
So instead of writing code for every single action, like clicking a button or entering text, you define reusable keywords that represent those actions.
Oh, okay.
So you're basically creating these building blocks, and then you create test cases by using these keywords.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's almost like writing a set of instructions in plain English.
I like that. It's like building with Lego blocks instead of starting from scratch every time.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes your tests more readable and easier to maintain, even for people who aren't programmers.
That's awesome. Okay, so it's not just about the tests themselves. The syllabus also mentions something about schema validation.
Yes.
For API and database testing. That sounds pretty technical to me. How does schema validation help me write better tests?
So think of it like this. A schema is like a blueprint. That defines the structure and data types that you expect in your API responses or database records.
Okay.
Schema validation basically checks if the data adheres to that blueprint.
So it's like having a spell checker for my data. making sure everything is formatted correctly.
Exactly. Instead of writing tons of individual checks, you can let the validation tool do the heavy lifting.
Okay.
For example, say your API is supposed to return a product idea. That's always a number.
Okay.
Schema validation can catch if it accidentally returns text instead.
Oh, I see.
Which could obviously cause problems later on.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that simplifies my tests too, right?
Absolutely. Less code, fewer errors, less maintenance.
That's the dream. Okay, speaking of efficiency, another area I'm always looking to improve is test execution.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you mentioned at the beginning you want to speed up your testing cycle.
Yeah.
So how can we optimize the way that our tests are actually executed?
So the syllabus talks about a few different strategies, like parallelization,
Okay.
splitting test suites, and using batch jobs in a CI/CD pipeline.
Hmm.
These are all ways to get your test running as fast as possible.
Okay.
But it's not just about raw speed. The environment where your tests run also plays a big role.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, are you testing in an environment that mirrors your production setup?
Hmm.
Or are there big differences that could mess with your results?
Yeah, because if my test environment is completely different from production, my tests might pass, but then everything falls apart when the code goes live.
Exactly.
And that's a nightmare.
It is. And so investing in infrastructure or tools to make that test environment as realistic as possible can save you a lot of headaches.
For sure. Now, speaking of potential headaches, let's talk about keeping your test automation architecture in sync with your software, which is always changing.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is. Have you ever struggled with that?
Oh, all the time. It's like I make one little change over here and suddenly 5 tests break over there.
Oh, yes. Feels like a constant game of catch-up.
It is, and the syllabus actually emphasizes the importance of being proactive.
Okay.
So before you make any changes to the software under test, even small ones, you should do a thorough impact analysis.
So like a what-if scenario, playing out how this change might affect everything else.
Yeah, exactly. You need to understand how those changes will impact your tests, your automation framework, even your overall testing strategy.
Wow.
This might involve close collaboration between developers, testers, and automation engineers.
Right.
And definitely clear communication.
That's key for sure.
Sometimes you might even need dedicated resources specifically focused on maintaining the test automation infrastructure.
Wow. Okay, so proactive planning is key.
Yeah.
But what about when things inevitably do change? How do we keep our automation framework adaptable?
So the syllabus talks about regularly evaluating and refactoring those core function libraries.
Okay.
You know, those reusable bits of code that make up the foundation of your automation because they can become bloated or outdated as your automation suite grows.
All right, so there's like spring cleaning for our code, getting rid of the clutter and making sure everything is organized and efficient.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Thanks.
And it's not just about making things tidy.
Okay.
This also makes it easier for new team members to understand the code.
Yeah, for sure.
And it improves the maintainability and performance of your automation.
Right.
And speaking of new team members, let's talk about something that's often overlooked: documentation.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I have a confession. Documentation isn't really my favorite part of the process.
I get it.
But I know it's important, especially when you're onboarding new team members. There's nothing worse than trying to decipher someone else's code without any context.
I agree with you, but good documentation isn't just about explaining what the code does.
Okay.
It's about the why behind the design decisions. Like, what were the assumptions, the limitations?
Right.
And it needs to be kept up to date.
So it's like a living document that evolves along with the code, not just a static file that gets forgotten somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And are there any tools out there that can help with this?
Yeah, there are some tools that can actually automatically generate documentation.
Wow.
From your code comments.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which can save you a lot of time.
Huge time saver. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from data analysis and AI to scripting techniques, test execution environments, maintaining that TAA. And even the importance of documentation.
Yeah.
It feels like continuous improvement really is a holistic journey.
It is.
It touches every part of the test automation process.
For sure.
And don't forget the human element.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
The syllabus talks about skilled automation engineers.
Right.
But it goes beyond technical expertise. It also highlights the importance of things like collaboration and communication.
Yeah.
And a shared commitment to quality.
It's about building that culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Where everyone on the team is empowered to identify issues, suggest solutions, and just make things better.
I like that.
Like we're doing right now. And what's really fascinating to me is that all this focus on improving our test automation ultimately leads to better software.
Absolutely.
And that brings us back to that final question from the syllabus about using test automation for screenshot and video generation. How do you think we can leverage that capability? Well, capturing evidence of bugs is the most obvious use case.
Yeah.
But I can also see how it would be helpful for documentation.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to explain complex workflows or UI interactions.
For sure, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Right. And I'm thinking, what if we could use these screenshots and videos to create, like, automated tutorials?
Oh, wow.
For new users, or even for marketing materials.
Yeah.
To showcase the application's features.
That's a great idea.
It's about thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
And finding creative ways to use our existing tools.
I love that. I hadn't even considered that.
That's the beauty of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
It's about constantly challenging ourselves to find better ways of doing things.
It really is.
And it's a journey worth taking.
It is.
I'm already feeling inspired to go back and take a fresh look at my automation setup.
Awesome.
And what I'm taking away from this is it's not about trying to implement every single suggestion from the syllabus. It's about finding what works for you.
Yeah. In your specific context, your team, your project.
Right. Like you were saying earlier about those AI-powered self-healing tools.
Mm-hmm.
They can be awesome.
They can.
But they're not a magic bullet.
Nope.
It's about finding the right balance.
Exactly. And it's about constantly evaluating, adapting, experimenting.
Yeah.
The world of test automation is constantly evolving, and there's always something new to learn.
And that brings us right back to that human element.
Mm-hmm.
Building a culture of continuous improvement isn't just about having the right tools.
Right.
It's about having the right mindset.
Couldn't agree more.
It's about fostering collaboration, encouraging experimentation.
Yeah.
And seeing failures as opportunities to learn and grow.
It's all part of the process.
And it's about leadership, creating an environment where continuous improvement is valued, supported, and rewarded.
That's important.
It sounds like it takes a village to raise a successful test automation solution.
It really does, but the rewards are worth the effort.
Yeah.
Increased efficiency, reduced costs, improved quality.
Right.
And ultimately, better software.
And better software makes everyone happy, right?
It does.
From developers to testers to end users.
Yeah.
It's a win-win-win.
It is. It's about creating a virtuous cycle where continuous improvement in test automation leads to better software.
Oh, I love that. So it's not just about automating tests.
Right.
It's about automating excellence.
I like that.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Continuous improvement isn't just about making your test automation solution better. It's about making yourself better.
I like that.
It's about constantly learning and growing.
Yeah.
And challenging yourself to find new and innovative ways to improve your craft.
Exactly.
It's about embracing a mindset of continuous learning, seeking out new knowledge, experimenting with new approaches, and always striving to be the best automation engineer you can be.